40 years after the incident, the case remains unresolved. But in the silence of old communication lines, engineers say you can sometimes still hear a faint echo repeating the familiar phrase, "I'm on the line." Engine driver Jun Shiraishi failed to return from his night shift on the Sanriku line. The train he was driving stalled between tunnels between Uzura and Hanamaki stations. An alarm was received at the control tower at 23:46, after which service on the line was temporarily suspended. When the task force arrived on scene, the locomotive was running. The engine was running, the cab lights were on, but the driver was not inside. The door was locked from the inside, and there were no signs of forced entry or damage. A radio microphone was found on the cabin floor. The speaker emitted a flat background noise with no recognizable sounds. The recording lasted for 13 minutes and ended automatically. According to the technical report, communications were stable at the time of the incident, and the equipment was in good working order. The last entry in the duty log, in Shiraishi's handwriting, read, "Line check, no deviations." No further entries were made after that. Personal belongings, documents, and the ticket slip were all in place, and there were no signs of a struggle. Iwate Prefectural Police launched an investigation the following morning. The train was towed to the Hanamaki depot, where a preliminary inspection was conducted under the supervision of the Transportation Safety Department. A partial palm print, the origin of which has not been determined, was found on the metal door panel. The first interrogations were conducted among the duty officers at Uzura Station. According to them, no disruptions in service had been recorded prior to the incident. Radio communications with the driver were normal, and his voice sounded calm and without any signs of strain. The last contact was recorded at 23:01, after which the connection was lost. The dispatcher's recording only captured background noise and a brief click before the line disconnected. JR East's technical department confirmed that the radio communication system was functioning without interruption at the time, and that the power outage occurred after the train had stopped. A police team inspected the tunnel where the train was parked. No signs of unauthorized personnel were found. CCTV cameras at the tunnel entrances recorded no movement of people or animals. There were no signs of braking on the tracks, and the safety system showed a manual brake light being triggered from the cabin. According to the engineer's report, the driver's door locking mechanism was activated from the inside, eliminating the possibility of outside tampering. A palm print on the interior panel was smudged, preventing identification. No traces of sweat or blood were found. That evening, investigators questioned the team of technicians who had been servicing the line. One of the engineers stated that short-term voltage fluctuations had been recorded at the site a week before the incident, but the cause had not been determined. An inspection revealed that the equipment was up to standard at the time of the incident. The railway company suspended train service on the section until the investigation was completed. On the third day of the investigation, the Commission confirmed that there had been no emergency braking system shutdown and that the train had been stopped manually. This fact became key in the police report, as it indicated that the engineer had acted deliberately before disappearing. The Shiraishi family was notified of the investigation's progress through the local branch. The wife reported that on the morning of his shift, her husband appeared tired but unfazed. She also added that the day before, he had checked his watch several times and said something had changed on the line. Colleagues described Shiraishi as a meticulous and disciplined worker who never violated regulations. A note with a brief reminder was found in his personal locker at the depot. Uzura section. Radio channel 3, check. Experts confirmed the note was in his handwriting. The police requested technical logs from the control panel. They show that the train's radio channel remained active for 13 minutes after the driver's disappearance. No evidence of interference or frequency changes was found. A telephone check revealed that 2 short calls to the station's internal line were made from the cabin that same night. Both connections lasted less than a second, and no station employee answered. Experts from JR East's audio lab analyzed a recording extracted from the locomotive's communications system. The magnetic track revealed a constant mid-frequency noise, not typical of a standard radio channel. Additionally, a repeating pulse every 6 seconds was detected, the source of which could not be determined. A comparative analysis revealed that this pulse did not match the railway network's data transmission frequency. The technical department suspected the signal might be coming from outside, but there were no radio stations or other devices with a similar frequency in the area. The police lab conducted its own analysis of the carrier. Experts noted that the signal structure resembled a reverse wave reflection, which occurs in a closed communications circuit. According to the report's conclusion, such an effect could not have occurred without the connection of a second terminal. This detail became the main basis for the theory of unauthorized access to the radio network. Police requested information about external communications providers, but no matches were found. The report stated that the communication channel was activated within the system, without an external call. On the fourth day of the investigation, the train was inspected again. The instrument panel was undamaged, and all controls were in their default positions. The emergency signaling unit recorded the manual entry of the 301 code, which indicates an emergency stop as ordered by the driver. Investigators investigated the possibility of suicide, but it was dismissed. The cabin doors were locked from the inside, and the window remained locked at the time of the inspection. Getting out without leaving a trace was physically impossible. On the fifth day, representatives from the Ministry of Transport arrived at the Hanamaki depot. They requested the case file and conducted their own audit. Their report noted that the operator left his workplace under unclear circumstances. No evidence of coercion was found. The Udzura station's safety log recorded a brief voltage drop at 2343. This coincides with the alarm activation. The Electrical Commission stated that the cause of the failure was undetermined, and the equipment did not register any overload. By the end of the first week, police searched the Shiraishi family home. A Sony voice recorder with a single cassette tape was found in the bedroom. The tape contained a recording about a minute long, containing the same impulses as the service recording from the locomotive. Experts determined that the recording was made the day before the driver's disappearance. It begins with a clicking sound, followed by short bursts of static and a sound similar to a human exhalation. Police suspected that Shiraishi was conducting a personal communications check. The report stated that no signs of tampering were found. Frequency analysis showed that the signal matched the internal range of the Sanriku Line radio network. Further inspection of other sections of the network revealed no similar noises. That same day, JR East officially announced that Shiraishi's case is being treated as an isolated incident that does not affect passenger safety. Despite the closure of the internal investigation, the Iwate Police Department decided to continue collecting testimony. The next stage included interviews with night shift workers, technicians, and witnesses living near the line. Investigators prepared inquiries at neighboring stations and depots to determine whether similar communication failures had been recorded. 3 sections of the line had indeed experienced brief signal fluctuations over the previous 6 months, but without any consequences. This fact was included in the final report of the first phase of the investigation. The commission concluded that the driver's disappearance was not related to technical malfunctions and required further investigation into the human factor. In the second week of the investigation, investigators focused on interviewing station personnel and technical specialists who worked on the Sanriku line on the night of the incident. A total of 24 people were interviewed, including 3 duty officers and 2 communications engineers. All testified that the system had been functioning properly prior to the train's stoppage, and no false alarms had been detected. Particular attention was paid to the radio channel reports. The station log noted that brief frequency jumps were recorded between 2340 and 2345. This occurred while Shiraishi was still on the line. Technical analysis showed that the fluctuations could not have been caused by weather conditions or electromagnetic interference. The police requested meteorological service records. According to the weather reports, there was no precipitation on the night of the incident. Atmospheric pressure was stable, and there were no magnetic disturbances. This ruled out a natural influence on the radio network. One of the depot's engineers reported receiving a private message from Shiraishi shortly before the incident. In it, the engineer mentioned that the connection was acting strangely and that the signal was being repeated with a delay. The message was sent via the internal data exchange system, 3 hours before the disappearance. An analysis of the digital log confirmed the receipt of this message, but its text was partially corrupted, and the second half of the file contained unreadable characters. Experts were unable to recover the data due to corrupted metadata. During a re-inspection of the locomotive, experts discovered an abnormal connection in the radio circuit. A thin wire, not included in the factory circuit, connected the amplifier unit to the external diagnostic connector. The cable was unmarked. The JR East Technical Committee determined that this change was not included in any official modification report. According to internal regulations, access to the communication panel is restricted to Level 3 specialists. The police requested a list of employees with such clearance. The depot's records listed 6 people, 2 of whom had already resigned by the time of the incident. One of them, communications engineer Takeshi Mizushima, left the company a month before the incident without explanation. Investigators attempted to contact him at his last known address in Sendai, but the apartment was empty. Neighbors reported that the man had moved out abruptly and had not disclosed his new address. A request to the registration service revealed that no movements were registered using his documents. Therefore, it was not possible to determine Mizushima's whereabouts. The Iwate Police Department's report noted this detail as possibly related to internal tampering with the locomotive's communication system. However, no evidence was found linking the engineer. At the same time, specialists from the Ministry of Transport conducted an independent assessment. According to their conclusion, the modification to the communication circuit could have been completed in a short period of time using standard maintenance tools, making the intervention undetectable during a cursory inspection. According to the Commission, the additional wire could have been used for test signal duplication. However, the lack of records in the technical log cast doubt on the legality of this connection. On the 10th day of the investigation, the police received a report from the sound recording lab. It indicated that the audio signal from the locomotive contained an overlap of 2 sources, with a phase shift of approximately 1.5 seconds. This meant that a second device was operating on the locomotive's frequency. The laboratory noted that such an effect is not typical for equipment malfunctions. The report used the term possible parallel communication source with internal access. This conclusion prompted the investigation to move to the next stage, which includes an analysis of the entire Sanriku Line radio network. An inspection of the entire Sanriku Line radio network began 3 days after the laboratory's report was published. During the inspection, specialists identified 2 more locomotives with communication units showing signs of tampering with the wiring. Both trains were used on routes connected to Uzura Station and were maintained by the same technical department. The damage was identical. A thin, additional wire connected the amplifier input to the external test jack. No signs of tampering or replacement of components were found. This suggests that the installation was performed by a staff member with access to the equipment. A comparison of maintenance records revealed that in both cases, the technical inspections were carried out by engineer Takeshi Mizushima. His signature appeared in the logs under the communications maintenance reports for April and May. After May, his name no longer appeared on any documents. Investigators concluded that the engineer may have been involved in unofficial testing of the signal transmission system. The Ministry of Transport sent a request to the Tokyo Institute of Telecommunications to determine whether any research related to railway communication channels was being conducted at the time. A week later, a response arrived confirming that the institute had indeed conducted a series of experiments, measuring signal delays in regional lines. However, the data on specific sections was classified, and access to it required government permission. A representative of the institute, speaking on condition of anonymity, confirmed that one of the pilot projects may have covered northern Iwate Prefecture, but declined to name specific stations. He noted that the purpose of the study was to investigate the resilience of communications with multi-layered signal routing. This answer matched the police expert's theory, who claimed that the pulses in Shiraishi's recording could have been caused by a signal traveling twice through a closed circuit. The report stated that the delay could not have occurred by chance and required external intervention. During the same period, J.R. East received an internal order to temporarily restrict access to communications archives and move all materials related to the Shiraishi case to the central office. This decision sparked discontent among employees involved in the investigation. One technician, who wished to remain anonymous, told a local publication that company management was trying to cover up traces of an internal experiment. He claimed the additional cables were installed at the direction of an external contractor, identified as a research team from the Ministry of Communications. Following the leak, J.R. East issued a press release stating that it had no knowledge of any third-party testing on the Sanriku line, and that all equipment modifications were in compliance with internal standards. In response, the Iwate police initiated a re-inspection of the depot where engineer Mizushima had previously worked. An unaccounted-for document file containing drawings labeled Delayed Channel System and Experimental Loop was found in the Communications Department's filing cabinet. The diagrams bore the same number as the locomotive driven by Shiraishi. The documents had no official seals, but Mizushima's signature was visible on one of the sheets. The papers were confiscated and sent to a lab for analysis. Experts determined that the paper was produced at the Institute of Telecommunications printing house, and the signature indeed belonged to Mizushima. This fact confirmed the engineer's connection to the experiment. The investigative team's report stated that the presence of unaccounted-for diagrams and the coincidence of the engineer's signature indicate that unauthorized communications tests were being conducted on operating trains. Following the publication of the interim results of the investigation, the Ministry of Transport declined to comment, and J.R. East announced that it was handing over further investigation to the police. After the case was officially handed over to the police, they began collecting new evidence. Investigators contacted former depot employees who worked at the same time as engineer Mizushima. 3 of them confirmed that nighttime technical inspections were conducted at the depot in 1985, which were not reflected in the documentation. One technician reported that portable equipment bearing Ministry of Communications markings was used during these inspections. The work was performed only at night, and regular employees were prohibited from participating. According to him, engineers connected wires to locomotive cabs, recorded signals, and monitored communication delays between line sections. The inspections were carried out without notifying depot management. These readings matched the discovered diagrams, which showed the connection points between the Uzura and Hanamaki stations. Investigators concluded that this particular section was used as a test site for the experiment. When investigators attempted to locate the Ministry of Communications archives for 1985, it turned out that most of the reports had been destroyed in 1998 as part of an internal disposal procedure. No documentary evidence of the experiment survived. Despite the lack of official documentation, police contacted former scientific consultants involved in those studies. One of them, retired Professor Nakajima, confirmed that the term delayed line was used at the time for experiments with internal communication circuits. The professor explained that the purpose of such tests was to verify the feasibility of signal retransmission within a closed network. He emphasized that the experiments were conducted on a theoretical level and were not intended to affect real-world transmission lines. When shown fragments of schematics found at the depot, Nakajima admitted that they matched early drafts of the laboratory materials his group had been working on. He claimed he hadn't realized these drawings could have been used on actual equipment. This comment marked the first official acknowledgement that the closed-circuit television experiment actually existed. The Ministry of Transport refused to confirm or deny this information, citing the expiration of the material's storage periods. Articles about a ghost train on the Sanriku line began appearing in the press. Local newspapers speculated that Shiraishi's disappearance was related to a communications test, and that J.R. East was concealing the details. Following growing public interest, police held a press conference stating that the investigation was ongoing and that the theory of a technical experiment was being considered a priority. Meanwhile, one of the former duty officers at the Uzura station reported seeing an unmarked car near the tunnel on the night of the incident, containing 3 men in communications contractor uniforms. This observation was not included in the initial report. Investigators attempted to identify these individuals, but the contractor archive for that year was incomplete, and most of the records were destroyed during the company's reorganization. A few weeks after this publication, the duty officer who had given the testimony was hospitalized after suffering a heart attack. A second interrogation was not possible, and he died before he could sign the official statement. The investigative team's report stated that the circumstances of the witness's death were not considered suspicious, but his statement remains the only mention of the presence of outside personnel on the night of the incident. Following the witness's death, the case received widespread media coverage. Several national television channels aired investigative reports, focusing on the possible connection between the communications experiment and the train driver's disappearance. The Ministry of Transport declined to comment, citing a lack of confirmed data. Amid growing public interest, police have stepped up their investigation of the Ministry of Communications archives. An incomplete set of documents related to an internal project codenamed Reverse Echo was discovered in a storage facility in Mie Prefecture. From the surviving pages, it appears that the project envisioned the creation of a communications system with controlled signal delay to test the stability of long-distance communication channels. Among the participating institutions was the Iwate Technical Institute. Experts compared the data and established that during that period, the institute collaborated with the JR East Railway Company on technical testing programs. This confirmed the possible overlap between the entities involved in the project. Following this discovery, the investigation became interdepartmental. The Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Communications, and the Iwate Police established a joint commission to investigate all the circumstances of the case. A review of the documents revealed that engineer Takeshi Mizushima, who was wanted by the Japanese government, was employed by the institute as an external consultant until July 1985. In August, his contract was canceled for unspecified reasons. The following week, police found a car registered in Mizushima's name parked outside the institute's old building in Tokyo. The car was locked, and a folder containing technical communications schematics was found on the driver's seat. The folder contained sheets of paper marked Uzura, Sanriku, and dates from June 1985. One page had a locomotive number written on it that matched the Shiraishi train. Experts analyzed the fingerprints and determined that the documents did indeed belong to Mizushima. No traces of anyone else in the car were found. The engineer himself has been placed on the federal wanted list, but his whereabouts have still not been established. Parallel to these events, a journalist from a local publication received an anonymous letter. It read, "He tried to stop the experiment, but the signal had already returned." Inside the envelope was an unmarked audio cassette. When the tape was played back, a metallic noise and background hum were heard, identical to the sound recorded in the recording from Shiraishi's cabin. 20 seconds later, a distorted voice could be heard in the background, uttering a short phrase, "Communication restored." An analysis of the tape revealed that the recording was made using equipment similar to that used in Sanriku line locomotives in the 1980s. Experts indicated that the signal could have been recorded directly from the internal channel. The police seized the tape and submitted it to a lab. Experts confirmed that the audio track had not been edited. Frequency analysis matched the data from Shirayashi's recording, indicating a common source. Following the publication of these results, the investigation entered a new phase. The Commission's report noted that the presence of a repeating signal after decades rules out a technical error and requires investigation of a possible external communication source. Following the revelation of the tape, interest in the case grew nationally. Newspapers and television channels ran daily reports discussing whether the signal from 1985 could have survived to the present day. Police issued a statement that the recording's origins were being investigated and urged against speculation. Amid mounting public pressure, JR East announced the creation of its own independent commission. Its task is to conduct an internal audit of the archives and equipment used on the Sanriku line in the 1980s. During the inspection, the commission discovered an unaccounted box of tapes in the central archive. The box was labeled Communications Tests, 1985, Series 3. Some of the tapes were damaged, but several were reproducible. One of the tapes contained a short fragment of background noise and a male voice saying, "Line check complete, connection stable." His voice matched that of Jun Shiraishi. Experts confirmed that the recording was made on identical equipment, but the file's creation date could not be determined because the control marks had been erased. After this tape emerged, police speculated that a test signal recording was being made on the night of the incident as part of the reverse echo experiment. This would explain the presence of an additional cable and the appearance of a second signal source. At the same time, an anonymous source provided journalists with another audio tape, found, according to him, in an old warehouse at the Communications Institute. It contained the same noise, but 5 minutes later, a quiet voice could be heard saying, "This isn't the line." Analysis showed that, unlike the first tape, where the signal had a constant frequency, the second recorded oscillations resembling synchronous interference, indicating simultaneous transmission from two different devices. Investigators hypothesized that someone may have been recording the signal simultaneously while Shiraishi was on the line. This theory became the primary argument in the interim results report. The Shiraishi family issued a statement denying they had received any official notification of the duplicate finds and requested that the police provide them with copies of the recordings. Investigators, citing the status of the evidence, refused. Afterwards, Shiraishi's widow gave an interview in which she revealed that a week before his disappearance, her husband left a piece of paper at home with a note. "If the line breaks, don't call back." She kept this note for 30 years. The handwriting was confirmed by experts as authentic. A fingerprint was found on the back of the paper, matching the one found on the interior panel of the locomotive's cab. This information led police to believe that Shiraishi had anticipated the communications failure and had knowingly participated in a test that was not officially reported. The investigative team's report noted that the driver's actions indicated awareness of the experiment being conducted and a willingness to interact with external operators. Following the report's publication, the case was transferred to Tokyo Central Police Headquarters. The Ministry of Transport stated that further comment would be made only after all audio recordings had been reviewed and their authenticity confirmed. After the case was transferred to Tokyo Metropolitan Police Headquarters, a special investigation unit was created. Its task was to consolidate all materials related to the train driver's disappearance and the reverse echo project. The team included technical experts, forensic experts, and radio communications analysts. The first weeks of the investigation were marked by the loss of several pieces of evidence. 2 tapes seized from the JR East archive were officially registered, but one disappeared during transport to the lab. The investigation failed to identify the culprits. An internal audit revealed that the document confirming the tape's transfer was signed by an employee who was on vacation at the time. This raised suspicions of signature forgery and possible third-party interference. The police opened a parallel investigation into the loss of evidence. It soon emerged that, at the same time, an electronic archive containing old communications experiment reports had been hacked at the Ministry of Transport. Login logs showed a connection from an internal terminal registered to a former radio systems engineer. He denied any involvement, claiming his account had been compromised. Following this, the Minister of Transport publicly acknowledged the leak and announced an internal investigation. However, the results of the investigation were never published. Amid the scandal, 2 high-ranking ministry officials resigned. Their statements did not provide reasons for their departures, but sources reported that both were involved in a project to develop secure communications lines in the 1980s. At the same time, Iwate police received information about the unauthorized removal of documents from the local archive. CCTV cameras captured an unknown person entering the premises late at night. The identity of the perpetrator was not established. Copies of the schematics previously found at the Hanamaki depot, as well as an expert report on the communication cable analysis, disappeared from the archive. These materials were considered key to confirming the system had been tampered with. The Central Police acknowledged that some evidence related to the case may have been destroyed. The report noted that The collection and storage of materials was conducted in violation of standard procedures. Journalists speculated that the destruction of evidence was part of an attempt to cover up evidence of government agencies' involvement in unauthorized testing. Police declined to comment. Following the publication of the articles, several JR East employees involved in the initial investigation received anonymous threatening phone calls. One technician reported being advised not to return to old business. These calls were recorded by the company's security service, but the source could not be determined. The numbers belonged to temporary cards registered under false names. Following this, JR East management requested witness protection from the police. Several key employees were temporarily transferred to other regions. An internal Tokyo police report noted that the investigation was complicated by the interference of unidentified individuals, and that some materials had already been irreversibly lost. Nevertheless, investigators decided to focus on analyzing the remaining audio recordings and searching for confirmation of the existence of a second communication channel. Analysis of the surviving audio recordings began in a laboratory at Tokyo Police Headquarters. Modern spectral methods were used to identify hidden frequency layers. Already at the first stage, experts noticed unusual noises resembling short feedback pulses. The study revealed that several segments of the audio contained a faint signal structure, repeating at 3-second intervals. This rhythm did not match any known radio communication standard used in the 1980s. Experts concluded that the signal was generated by two sources operating in the same frequency band. When superimposed, they created an echo reflection effect, as previously mentioned in the materials on the reverse echo experiment. After the publication of the interim results, information appeared in one of the online journals about the existence of a third cassette, allegedly in the possession of a former employee of the Communications Institute. A few days later, the police did indeed receive an anonymous package containing a magnetic tape. It was marked 03-Udzura/internal channel. The recording was about 10 minutes long and began with the usual line noise. At the 5th minute, a voice could be clearly heard saying, "Reception is unstable. Repeat signal." This was followed by a short metallic ringing sound, like the pressing of a switch. Experts confirmed that the acoustic parameters matched Jun Shiraishi's voice. Therefore, all 3 tapes discovered in recent years featured the same speaker. The lab's report noted that none of the recordings showed any signs of editing. The tape had aged naturally, and the magnetic track structure was consistent with equipment from the 1980s. Investigators believed all 3 tapes were part of a single experiment conducted on the Sanriku line. However, they were unable to determine who exactly directed the project and why the recordings were made without official permission. Disagreements arose within the investigative team. Some insisted on a technical malfunction, while others claimed the driver's disappearance was connected to unauthorized closed-circuit testing. Police officials demanded that the leak be curbed, but by that point, the data had already appeared in the press. Several outlets published excerpts from the reports, which mentioned the terms closed loop and distorted channel. Following this, the Minister of Internal Affairs held an emergency meeting, demanding a halt to publications that threatened the reputation of state institutions. Journalists received an official warning against disclosing investigative data. Despite this, independent researchers began publishing their own analyses, claiming that the echo effect indicated an artificially created communication loop closed within a single network. These publications increased pressure on the police, and the investigative team was forced to publish a partial report. It confirmed that the recordings were authentic, but the source of the signal had not been fully identified. The report drew criticism from the technical community because it failed to explain how the duplicate channel could have been created without an external connection. In response, the police stated that further investigations were ongoing, and the results would be published after all materials had been verified. Investigators summoned several former employees of the Technical Institute of Communications mentioned in old reports for questioning. Of the 7 invited, 3 agreed to testify. All confirmed that in the mid-1980s, the Institute had indeed conducted a project to study closed-loop radio transmissions. An engineer working in the Measurement Systems Lab reported that tests were conducted not only within the Institute's premises, but also at existing infrastructure facilities. He declined to specify which facilities were used, citing confidentiality. A second witness, a former communications operator, testified that under the direction of an engineer named Mizushima, a circuit was being developed at the time that allowed for recording an internal signal without the involvement of a central unit. This circuit was unofficially dubbed the mirror line. Both witnesses claimed that the experiments were financed through a private intermediary company affiliated with the Ministry of Transport. The funds came from contracts for research into the stability of regional communications lines. The Institute's accounting archives did indeed contain records of project funding, commissioned by a third party, but the organization's name was not specified. The funding amounted to the equivalent of 5 million yen at the time. The Financial Directorate confirmed that these funds were allocated under the government's Technical Upgrade of Regional Networks program. This indirectly confirmed government participation in the project. The commission then turned to the Ministry of Finance's archives, where copies of equipment purchase contracts were found. The list included radio units of the same type installed on Sanriku Line trains. These documents confirmed that the equipment for the experiment was officially supplied and registered with the state. However, there were no records of its installation at specific sites. The police concluded that the tests may have been carried out without the knowledge of the transport company's management, and that the installation was carried out by engineers directly involved in the project. The Central Control Report indicated that the experiment was likely intended to test the stability of the signal during repeated transmissions. However, the circumstances leading to the driver's disappearance remained unclear. After this data emerged, investigators attempted to contact other participants in the project, but most of them had either died or no longer lived at their previous addresses. One of the surviving consultants agreed to speak anonymously. He said the reverse echo project was shut down after an operator loss incident occurred on one of the test networks. He did not provide further details. These words marked the first direct mention of a human casualty associated with the experiment. However, there was no evidence to support this in the case file. Following the publication of this information, the ministry again refused to comment on the situation, stating that investigating past projects is not within the department's current remit. The commission's internal report concluded, the experiment has been confirmed. No technical consequences have been established, and the participants' liability has not been determined. With this, the first stage of the investigation was officially completed. After completing the first stage of the investigation, police returned to the physical evidence. Excavations began at the site of the old Hanamaki depot in the area that previously housed the communications hangar. Workers discovered a metal fragment of a device with a partially preserved EO3 marking. Experts determined that the recovered unit belonged to the type of signal amplifier used in experimental communications systems in the 1980s. Damage indicated that the device had been exposed to high temperatures. Analysis of the internal circuit board revealed that the circuit differs from standard models in that it features a dual receive circuit and an additional recording port. This confirmed the theory of an internal echo channel. The expert's report stated that such a design could create a delayed response, even without an external source, if the signal was shorted within the circuit. This conclusion became a decisive argument in favor of the version about the technical nature of the phenomenon. But the question remained: why did the operator disappear if the equipment did not involve physical impact on a person? In search of answers, investigators began interviewing former Uzura Station employees. One of them, a communications technician named Izida, agreed to testify almost 40 years after the events. He said he was at the station on the night of the incident and heard a short signal, similar to human breathing, through the internal communication channel. He said it lasted no more than 10 seconds. Ishida hadn't reported it then because he thought the line was overloaded. Only now did he acknowledge that the sound had been repeated with a distinct rhythm, as if someone were speaking, but the words were unintelligible. When experts compared his testimony with the audio recordings, they discovered a match in the frequency of the noise signal. This meant that the witness had indeed heard the same wave as that recorded on the tapes. The police report noted that Witness testimony confirms the existence of a genuine audio response at the time of the incident, which was not the result of a technical error. Following the publication of these data, the phenomenon of internal signal short-circuiting has once again gained traction in scientific circles. Some experts have suggested that the experiment created a closed radio loop, which could have caused the system's anomalous behavior. However, no evidence was found to confirm physical impact on the operator. Electromagnetic radiation capable of causing harm was ruled out by the equipment's power level. However, one laboratory hypothesized that a resonant loop with a reverse sound feedback effect could have occurred during transmission. This could have led to acoustic distortion of the signal's perception. The laboratory report noted that in such a case, the person at the transmitter could perceive their own voice with a delay, which caused disorientation. Despite the technical explanation, investigators were unable to determine how Shiraishi escaped the cockpit with the door locked. The possibility of an unintentional exit through the emergency hatch was ruled out. The mechanism remained intact. After fruitless attempts to explain the driver's disappearance through technical reasons, investigators decided to conduct a full survey of the underground communications between Uzura and Hanamaki stations. JR East engineers provided archival cable line maps, most of which did not match modern diagrams. When comparing the 1980s plans with current drawings, it was discovered that one of the old communication lines bypassed the main tunnel and connected to an underground service shaft that had not been used since 1987. Excavations in the area confirmed the presence of a buried passage. Inside, they found the remains of a cable with markings similar to those found earlier at the depot. The cable led toward an industrial area that once housed a branch of the Communications Institute. Experts noted that the cable had an additional protective sheath, uncommon for railway lines. This indicated that it was used for research purposes. Police suspected that the underground line may have served as a backup channel for the reverse echo experiment. This section may have been the site of the failure that caused the abnormal signal behavior. The following week, investigators contacted engineer Mizushima's relatives. His nephew, who lives in Mie Prefecture, reported that boxes of documents and technical records were left in the house after his uncle's disappearance. A notebook with notes in Japanese and English was found among the papers. One page read, "The line is active even without an operator." Other records included date codes such as June 17 and July 3rd, as well as the abbreviations UE and SE, which experts say refer to the Uzuru and Sanriku echo sites. These notes were handed over to the police and added to the case file. A handwriting analysis confirmed that the handwriting belonged to Mizushima. Separate sheets contained drawings of communication circuits with the notes delay 1.5 seconds, and reflection synchronous. These designations matched the parameters identified during the analysis of the tapes. The investigative team's report noted that the engineer's notes could have served as working notes for an experiment conducted during that period. After reviewing the documents, the police again contacted the Ministry of Transport, requesting confirmation of Mizushima's participation in government projects. In response, they stated that his name was not on any official lists. However, a record of payments received by the engineer under a government contract in 1985 was discovered in the pension fund's archive. This became indirect evidence of his connection to the ministry. Based on this data, the commission concluded that the engineer was indeed working as part of a government project, and that the disappearance of the engineer, Shiraishi, could have been an unforeseen consequence of the experiment. Following the report's publication, the government issued a statement expressing gratitude for the work done, and emphasizing that the investigation revealed no evidence of foul play. However, the document made no mention of the recovered recordings or equipment. Following the publication of the report and the government's official statement, media attention to the case increased sharply. Several major television channels launched independent investigations, requesting access to the forensic materials from the tapes. The police refused, citing their status as classified evidence. Despite this, copies of some documents were obtained by journalists. They contained fragments of technical reports that explicitly stated that the recordings demonstrate a repeating acoustic pattern, unrelated to natural noise. Following the publication of this information, the police were forced to order a re-examination. The new test was conducted at a Ministry of Defense laboratory equipped with more modern equipment. The results of the investigation confirmed the authenticity of the tapes. Moreover, spectral analysis revealed a low-frequency signal repeating at intervals of 1 5/10 of a second, precisely the delay recorded in engineer Mizushima's reports. This result was decisive confirmation that the equipment was operating in a closed feedback loop. The lab's report stated that the signal source was artificial in nature and could not have arisen by chance. After receiving the results, some of the materials were seized and transferred to a closed Tokyo police storage facility. A week later, the press reported that several documents previously held in an open archive had been removed from the database. The official police statement said that the deletion was carried out as part of a system update procedure, but independent observers noted that the files that had disappeared were precisely those that mentioned the experiment's internal codes. Following these events, the head of the investigative team resigned, citing internal disagreements and external pressure. His position was filled by an Interior Ministry officer not previously involved in the investigation. Following the management change, press releases became more subdued. All references to the connection between the reverse echo project and the driver's disappearance were excluded from official statements. However, in private conversations, former investigators stated that they were prohibited from commenting on the case under threat of disciplinary action. Some of them claimed that one more tape remained in storage, not included in the registry. Journalists' attempts to access this storage facility were unsuccessful. The Ministry of Internal Affairs stated that access was restricted for reasons of national security. This statement sparked even greater public interest. Independent experts suggested that the tape may have contained additional audio fragments associated with the driver's voice after the disappearance. At the same time, recordings of supposedly leaked audio fragments appeared on social media. They featured a low background noise, distorted voices, and the repeated phrase, "Reception is unstable." The authenticity of the recordings could not be verified. Following the release of these files, police issued a warning against disseminating fake materials that discredit the investigation. However, the deletion of the files only heightened public interest. Amid pressure from the press, the opposition parliament demanded the creation of an independent commission to investigate the driver's disappearance and any possible cover-up by ministries. The proposal was rejected by a majority vote. 2 months after the parliamentary debate, information leaked from the Ministry of Defense laboratory where the tapes were being analyzed. An unknown source leaked copies of an internal report marked for official use only to the press. The document contained frequency spectrum graphs and expert commentary, claiming that one of the audio fragments contained a low-amplitude human signal after the main transmission ceased. This phrase caused a significant public outcry. Independent experts deciphered the spectrogram and suggested that in the final seconds of the recording, there may indeed be a faint voice saying the words, "The channel is not complete." Following the report's publication, the government issued a statement that the leak constituted a breach of state secrets and ordered an internal investigation into the disclosure of the data. Amid the scandal, one of the journalists who first published the documents disappeared. His car was found on the side of the road in Tochigi Prefecture, with his personal belongings inside, but the journalist himself was nowhere to be found. Police opened a missing persons case, but did not officially link his disappearance to the publication of the report. However, the publication's editorial staff stated that the journalist had been preparing a story about the fourth tape before his disappearance. According to his colleagues, he claimed to have received a message from an unknown sender offering to hand over the recording in exchange for publishing the truth. The meeting was scheduled to take place on the day of his disappearance. A week after the incident, the police received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photograph of a cassette tape box marked 04 closed circuit. The tape itself was missing. The back of the photograph read, "No one was supposed to hear her." Experts confirmed that the photo was taken in a room resembling a Defense Ministry communications lab, but they were unable to determine the time it was taken. This episode became a new point of tension in the investigation. Investigators acknowledged that there was indeed another tape in the archives, but access to it was restricted. An internal police document leaked to the press confirmed that tape number 4 is stored in a restricted area under the code SE9. It also stated that the contents were not to be reproduced without special permission. When journalists sought official comment, the ministry's press service stated that such materials do not exist or have been lost. This statement contradicted internal records, which referred to the tape as an active storage facility. The public perceived the refusal as an attempt to conceal information. Small demonstrations took place in Tokyo and Morioka, demanding disclosure of the Shiraishi case and the publication of a full report on the reverse echo project. Amid the protests, a temporary monitoring commission was created in Parliament. Its members were granted limited access to some materials, but tape number 4 was not included. Following the meetings, the commission stated that the inconsistencies discovered require further verification, and recommended that the government declassify the 1985 archive data. The decision was postponed indefinitely. Following the announcement of the postponement of the archive's declassification, public pressure intensified. Independent activists launched a campaign called Voice from Udzura, demanding the case file be opened and the recording from tape number 4 be released. Within a week, the petition had received over 100,000 signatures. The government has not issued an official response, but internal discussions have begun within the police about the possibility of a partial release. Several officers stated that further concealment could undermine the credibility of the investigation. At the same time, a signal indicating an unauthorized access attempt was received from the locked vault where the tape was stored. Cameras recorded the entry of a technical department employee, but he denied any tampering, claiming the system had triggered a false alarm. During the investigation, it was discovered that the audit trail for that day was partially corrupted. The login times did not match the security system logs, raising suspicions of deliberate data manipulation. A few days later, a short audio file appeared online, presumably a fragment of tape number 4. The recording, less than a minute long, featured noise, followed by a male voice saying, "The connection is not interrupted." The Ministry of Internal Affairs immediately denied the authenticity of the recording, calling it an edit of unknown origin. However, experts noted that the sound structure and frequency characteristics matched previous recordings. Technical analysts' reports stated that the background noise was identical to the noise emitted by a Sanriku line locomotive, indicating that the source of the sound was the same as Shiraishi's recordings. Following the file's publication, websites distributing the recording began to be blocked en masse. Domain owners reported receiving notices from government agencies demanding the removal of the materials. This sparked a new wave of protests. Public organizations claimed that the authorities were attempting to cover up the evidence of an experiment that resulted in a fatality. In response, the government issued a statement decrying manipulation of public opinion and violation of state secrets laws. Amid the protests, several independent radio labs began their own examination of the file copy. One of them, located in Osaka, published a report stating that the recording was authentic and showed no signs of digital editing. A day after the publication, the laboratory reported that its servers had been hacked. All files related to the tape's analysis, including reports and audio fragments, had disappeared. An investigation into the incident yielded no results. One of the specialists conducting the analysis then disappeared. His family reported him missing, but the official investigation failed to locate him. Following this, police increased security at the archives and announced that all materials on the Shiraishi case were temporarily placed under high security. Employees were prohibited from commenting. Despite this, independent sources claimed that there was a group within the ministry advocating for the recording's declassification. They claimed that tape number 4 contained a fragment of a conversation recorded after the train driver's disappearance. According to unconfirmed reports, the same voice heard on the previous tapes can be heard saying the short phrase, "The channel is open, I'm still here." This information has not been officially verified. Following the spread of rumors about the contents of tape number 4, the government held an emergency meeting with representatives from the Ministry of the Interior, the Ministry of Defense, and the prosecutor's office to discuss a strategy for interacting with the press and measures to prevent further leaks. Following the meeting, authorities declared the investigation officially closed, and all materials found were of no public interest and contained no new facts about the case, which sparked intense public criticism. Several opposition MPs filed a request to review the decision, but the government commission rejected the appeal, citing a lack of new evidence, and closed the discussion. At the same time, foreign media reported that a copy of one of the tapes had appeared outside the country, presumably in Europe, and that the recording had been transmitted by a former employee of the Communications Institute who emigrated in the late 90s. The European Telecommunications Laboratory conducted an independent analysis and published a report stating that the recording was genuine and that the background noise matched the characteristics of Japanese railway equipment from the mid-1980s. The announcement caused an international outcry, and the Japanese government issued an official note of protest, stating that the materials had been obtained illegally. Nevertheless, public pressure within the country continued to mount, with journalists rallying in Tokyo demanding the release of all audio recordings, and several universities publicly supporting the Open Access Initiative for historical materials. In response, police stated that any copies of the tapes outside Japan could not be considered reliable without official confirmation. But independent checks continued overseas. European researchers discovered that a faint double signal could be heard in the last minute of the recording, and after filtering, it turned out to be an overlap of two voices, one saying, "Check complete," the other responding, "I'm on the line." This data confirmed that the signal did indeed have an internal source, but its structure indicated the interference of a second transmitter, and this became the first technical evidence of the existence of a dual communication channel. Following the report's publication, the international scientific community approached the Japanese government with an offer to hand over copies of all the records for independent analysis, but there was no response. At the same time, a leaked document called SE Report 9 appeared in the press, which stated that tape number 4 contained a recording of an internal test conducted approximately 40 minutes after the driver's disappearance. If the report's data is accurate, then the voice captured on the recording belonged to a person who was already officially considered missing at that time. The government declined to comment on the document's authenticity, and a Defense Ministry spokesman said no confirmed recordings made after the incident existed. Despite the denials, the publication of the S9 report generated international interest, with several foreign publications calling it the Japanese equivalent of classified Cold War research, and some analysts suggesting that the reverse echo project could have military significance. Following the publication of the leaked document, public attention to the case reached a peak, and discussions in Tokyo about the possibility of establishing an international fact-checking commission began again. Several former engineers at the Institute of Communications agreed to be interviewed and confirmed that the reverse echo project did indeed exist and was funded directly through government grants. One of the engineers said the purpose of the experiment was to test the stability of the radio channel during dual signal transmission, and that the results could be used in defense communications systems. Police declined to comment on his statements, but leaked internal correspondence showed that some investigators considered the military use theory quite likely. Shortly thereafter, an independent journalist from Tokyo published a series of articles claiming that a copy of the tape was being held in an overseas archive at a research center in Switzerland. A few days later, a representative of the center confirmed that he had indeed received the audio recording from a private source and was ready to hand it over to the Japanese side upon an official request. Japan's foreign ministry did not comment, but diplomatic sources said the request was sent informally. When the recording was played privately, experts noted the presence of a short signal that coincided with the end of the famous tape number 3. Which meant that both recordings were sequential parts of the same conversation. This conclusion became a key point in the new round of investigation, as it confirmed that the connection was not interrupted at the moment the driver disappeared. International publications called this the first direct evidence of signal continuity after the operator's disappearance. In response, the Japanese government stated that any materials obtained through unofficial means could not be considered evidence, and that its internal investigation had been completed. Nevertheless, the public continued to demand an explanation, and online fundraising initiatives emerged to support an independent scientific analysis of all the tapes. A month after these events, part of the Institute of Communications archive servers was damaged during unauthorized access, and most of the digital copies of the recordings disappeared. The investigation revealed that the intrusion was carried out from within, from the work terminal of an employee who quit the following day. Following this, the government announced that all materials from the Reverse Echo project had been permanently destroyed, and that further investigation was impossible for technical reasons. Following the official announcement of the complete destruction of the materials, the Reverse Echo project was finally closed, but some investigators continued to work unofficially, collecting copies of documents from private sources. Among the files found were internal correspondence from the Ministry of Transport, discussing the allocation of additional funds to restore the communication line between Uzura and Hanamaki stations several weeks after the incident. The correspondence included the phrase, "Activate the backup circuit until the test is completed," indicating that the line remained active even after the driver's disappearance. An independent journalist who previously worked on the case returned to the investigation and stated that she had obtained a copy of the audio recording from the private archive of a former engineer at the Communications Institute. She claimed that the tape contained a voice repeating the words, "transmission stable," followed by a brief echo that matched the characteristics of the known tape number 3. Laboratory analysis confirmed the authenticity of the media and the age of the magnetic layer, which ruled out the possibility of modern editing. The publication of the report sparked a new wave of discussion, and government agencies again tried to restrict the distribution of the materials, citing security issues. Despite the pressure, the journalist prepared a documentary report detailing the discrepancies found in the ministry reports and the connections between the Reverse Echo project and experiments in indoor radio relay transmission. The report aired on one of the national channels and generated significant public response, garnering millions of views online. Authorities called the broadcast speculative and misleading, but the program continued to circulate online and be translated into other languages. A few weeks after the broadcast, the journalist said she had received threats and was being monitored, after which she temporarily left Tokyo. The police have not officially commented on the situation, but a source within the department reported that she was indeed provided with security. At the end of the year, an independent commission created at the initiative of universities and human rights organizations published its own report, in which it acknowledged that the Reverse Echo project had the hallmarks of a closed, state-level research program. The document emphasized that the disappearance of engineer Jun Shiraishi was directly related to technical tests on the Sanriku line, and that attempts to destroy materials indicated a deliberate cover-up. Despite the public outcry, the government took no further action, and the case was again filed under the heading of Research Anomaly without evidence of a crime. Following the publication of the Independent Commission's report, a new phase of the investigation began, focusing on verifying the authenticity of the remaining materials and identifying the sources of the leaks. During an audit of the archives of the Institute of Communications, employees discovered a box of damaged documents containing part of the correspondence between engineer Mizushima and the project management. One of the letters mentioned the phrase, "operator response unstable, signal held," which, according to experts, confirmed that the system continued to operate after the driver disappeared. At the same time, one of the former technicians at the Hanamaki depot was found dead in his home. The official cause of death was listed as heart failure, but neighbors claimed that unknown people were watching him. Police said they found no evidence of foul play, but his death coincided with the release of a second independent report. The new report included detailed signal graphs and a timestamp that matched the minute contact with the locomotive was officially lost. The report stated that the background noise level on the tape increased gradually, as if the signal source was being removed rather than being cut off suddenly. This fact became the central argument in favor of the version that the driver could have been in the active communication zone longer than previously thought. The commission noted that the technical characteristics of the reverse echo experiment indicate the possibility of signal reflection between closed circuits, creating an internal loop effect. Following the publication of the report, some members of Parliament again raised the issue of declassifying the project's materials, but the government limited itself to a formal expression of gratitude for the work done. Independent researchers continued to analyze the obtained data and discovered a match between the sound structure on the last tape and the noise from the equipment in the underground cable tunnel of the Udzura station. This allowed us to assume that the last seconds of the recording were made outside the locomotive cabin, possibly inside the technical room. However, attempts to survey the tunnel were unsuccessful, as access to the old communications was closed after the line was reconstructed. The commission's final report concluded that the disappearance of engineer Jun Shiraishi remains unsolved, but that the data collected confirms the existence of a closed communications experiment, the consequences of which have not been fully studied. The report concluded by emphasizing that government agencies should acknowledge the tests and take steps to prevent similar incidents in the future, but no official action was taken. After the publication of the Independent Commission's final report, the case was finally consigned to the archives, but public interest in the story of the engineer's disappearance did not wane, and the topic of reverse echo continued to appear in documentaries and university studies. Iwata University held a temporary exhibition dedicated to the events of the 1980s, which featured a reconstruction of the telephone booth and a model of the old equipment used in the experiment. Visitors noted that the exhibition was depressing, particularly the recording of a quiet hum played through headphones, identical to that recorded on the original tapes. A few months after the exhibition opened, a new publication appeared online claiming that the original tape number 4 still existed and was kept in a private collection outside the country. The source claimed that a copy of the recording was being passed on for archiving, and that at the end of it, the barely audible phrase, "blame no one," could be heard. The authenticity of the message could not be verified, but the news sparked another wave of interest and renewed discussions about the need for full disclosure of the materials. At this time, the government issued a short statement reminding that the retention period for documents in the case had expired, and that any unofficial materials could not be considered as evidence. Despite this, independent researchers continued to collect oral testimony, and one of the former engineers admitted to hearing about a classified report marked not for publication that concerned the final tape. According to him, the document claimed that the signal did indeed persist after the operator's disappearance, but the source of the communication could not be determined. Sometime later, Iwate University published a commemorative publication for the 40th anniversary of the incident, which briefly described the history of the reverse echo project, calling it an example of technical risk in past experiments. The book's conclusion stated that a memorial sign dedicated to all the participants in the research whose names have not been preserved had been erected at the site of the old depot. The plaque is engraved with the words, "The connection was broken, but the voice remained." In an interview with a television channel, the investigative journalist said that the story of Shiraishi is not over as long as at least one recording continues to exist, and as long as someone listens to it. Today, copies of all available audio fragments are stored in the National Library's digital archive and are open to researchers, but the originals have never been found.